about an age-old theory called utilitarianism. It talked about the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest number of people. And this, we know, came from two philosophers named Jeremy Bentham and John Locke. In week 2, we learned about a different idea that opposed utilitarianism. This was libertarianism. And this idea came first from the philosopher John Locke, and then more recently, the more contemporary thinkers Milton Friedman and Robert Nozick. Now, once again, now that we're in our 3rd week, we're going to jump back in time to 1724, the birth of what we now know as a very enlightened thinker named Immanuel Kant. Immanuel Kant, born in 1724, went into the University of Königsberg at age 16. By age 31, he became a professor. And he was paid based upon the number of students that attended his class. This would be a good system to install at the University of Tokyo. Now, it was only when he was age 57 when he wrote his first major work, The Critique of Pure Reason. He was age 57 at that time. And then 5 years later, he wrote the groundworks for the metaphysics of morals. These 2 books are by far some of the most difficult books to understand in moral and political philosophy. But our job today isn't to read the book. It's not to fully understand it from cover to cover, but explore some of the main ideas of Immanuel Kant and figure out how they apply to real-life cases today. Now, when we first begin to talk about Immanuel Kant, we can first start by looking at what he says on utilitarianism. Immanuel Kant rejects the notion of utilitarianism. If you guys recall, the very first week of class, we talked about a trouble. And in this case, we said that it would be wrong to kill 1 so that you could save 5 in week 1, the very first lecture, because John Stuart Mill had said you have to think about the long-term consequences of your actions. John Stuart Mill said you also can't push someone off the bridge, because then, in the long term, people will be afraid to go on a bridge. John Stuart Mill also said, if you're a doctor at the University of Tokyo, you can't take a healthy person's organs, because then people would be afraid to go to the University of Tokyo hospital. Immanuel Kant says this is not the right reason. He rejects John Stuart Mill as well. And Kant says that to act according to utilitarianism is to act heteronomously. What does he mean by that? He means that you are a slave of pleasure and pain. Kant doesn't reject the notion that all of us feel pleasure and pain. He accepts this. If Kant takes a needle and pokes himself, he'll feel pain. This he understands. But he also says that we're all rational human beings capable of reason. And because of this, we need to act not heteronomously, but autonomously. What does he mean when he says to act autonomously? He means we need to act based upon universal laws. Universal laws that were applied before exploring specific cases. Now, Kant rejects John Stuart Mill because he also looks at the motive of the act. John Stuart Mill says, if I push this fat man off the bridge, what does John Stuart Mill say? People would be afraid to go on a bridge. Kant says you're not treating the person as an end in himself. Kant says that person is treated as a means. Now, you might be confused. you might have been confused 5 minutes ago. So let me try to give you a simple, very simple example for what Kant means by autonomous and heteronomous, what he means by means and ends. Imagine you are a student at the University of Tokyo, and you want good grades. You want good grades because you want to get a good job. You want to get a good job because you want a family. You want a family because you want kids. And you want kids because you like kids. See, all of this, you're acting upon means, not ends. You should be getting good grades because getting good grades itself is a good act. You should be finding a good job because finding a good job in and of itself is a good act. Kant says we can't be using people as means. If you push a fat man over the bridge, we're using him as a means to stop the trolley car. And Kant says this is morally unjustified. Now, when you really begin to think about Kant's universal theory, the universal maxim, we call this the categorical imperative. And what he means by a categorical imperative is to act upon a universal maxim that holds true for every case. Difficult, right? But let me give you an example. Kant says people cannot lie. In no instance are you allowed to lie. You cannot lie no matter the circumstance. Because once you're permitted to lie, then people will no longer respect obligations. People will no longer respect contracts. People will no longer respect other people's words if you lie. And this is where our case studies begin today. Is it, do you believe, morally justified to lie? Today, we will gradually challenge Kant and his categorical imperative. And this is where we start. Today, I'm wearing a very bright tie, a very bright University of Tokyo tie. I think this tie is cool. Now, you might think this tie is ugly. But if you tell me this tie is ugly, you might think, oh, we'll hurt his feelings. Maybe you won't do this anymore. So you decide not to tell me that. Kant says, if you think it's ugly, let's say I ask you, do you think my tie is good looking? And you really think it's ugly, even if it might hurt my feelings, even if I might no longer wear this tie anymore, Kant says you're morally obligated to tell me the truth. So let's take a poll. We call these white lies, right? We call these white lies, saying lies to try to protect people's feelings and keep them feeling good about themselves. Let's take a poll. Raise your hand if you think Kant is right in saying that we cannot allow white lies. And raise your hand if you think Kant is going too far. White lies are okay at times. So it seems like we have a majority, and no one seems to be arguing against white lies. Everyone here is such a good person. So who wants to tell me, why is it okay to say a white lie? You're still lying, but why is a white lie morally justified? Okay.
If I tell you the truth, to my feeling, the friendship between me and you is broken because of the lie and because of the truth saying. Yeah. So I think it is justified to tell a lie.
And what's your name? Takahiro. Takahiro says, our bonds of intimacy between friends, family, acquaintances, teachers, professors, mentors, lovers, boyfriends, and girlfriends, it could be hurt if we keep on lying to you. It could be hurt if we are absolutely true to each other. Perhaps you get married, 50 years has passed, you're both 70, your wife asks you,